Law firms are in a moment of disruption, and there's lots of forces causing that disruption in the legal profession. Just three come to mind. Changing client expectations. Clients are asking for work at lower costs, things that are costs that are more predictable. They're looking for more collaboration. They're expecting their law firms to be more innovative and work with them to change processes. They're expecting law firms to measure their work and track metrics in new ways. And law firms have to ask, do we have the leadership within our firms to lead change to best meet these client expectations?
You're listening to the Legal Mastermind Podcast with your hosts Ryan Klein and Chase Williams, the go-to podcast for learning from the experts in the legal community about effective ways to grow and manage your law firm.
Welcome to another episode of Legal Mastermind Podcast. My name is Ryan Klein. I have with me, as always, Chase Williams. And today we have special guest Mark Beasy. How's it going, Mark?
Oh, it's great. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. And so we've been chatting just for a few minutes before we got started, and we're very excited to go over the subject of leadership and definitely how law firms can kind of start creating change within their law firms through leadership. So before we get started with that, why don't you give us a little bit about your background?
Thanks, Ryan and Chase. I've been consulting to law firms in the area of leadership development and business development for about the last 12 years. Before that, I was a chief marketing officer for Holland and Hart, and before that, Hodgson Russ in New York. And before that, I was a director of marketing for an architectural firm in upstate New York. I teach at the University of Denver School of Law. I'm a former faculty at the Center for Creative Leadership.
Thanks so much, Mark. So really, I guess the basis of our conversation today is going to be surrounding why leadership development is so important. I know that your company, Leadership for Lawyers, that's what you focus on: retreats, leadership development, business development, strategy and planning, key client development. So why is it so important, and why have you spent your career focusing around this?
Well, thanks, Chase. Law firms are in a moment of disruption, and there's lots of forces causing that disruption in the legal profession. Just three come to mind. Changing client expectations. Clients are asking for work at lower costs, things that are costs that are more predictable. They're looking for more collaboration. They're expecting their law firms to be more innovative and work with them to change processes. They're expecting law firms to measure their work and track metrics in new ways. And law firms have to ask, do we have the leadership within our firms to lead change to best meet these client expectations? Another force might be technology. There are lots of legal technology firms and technologies out there right now beyond e-discovery, automation of contracts, using big data to diagnose problems, using big data to make predictive analytics. If you talk to the leaders of those new legal tech companies over the past couple of years, they'll tell you that the challenge is not the technology. The challenge is getting law firms to use those technologies in an appropriate way. So much so they've had that problem of law firms being reluctant to change that they tend to go to clients first and say, hey, you adopt this technology, and then force your law firms to do that. Another force is we've got a radically changing legal talent market. Millennials have been in the market for a long time. Now the oldest millennials are our youngest partners. And this younger generation has higher expectations for managers and leaders. They want more frequent and quality feedback. They want to be informed and part of the loop. They want to be part of their community. And a lot of law firm leaders don't have that experience in changing culture or adapting to a new generation. And so you're seeing some law firms experiencing high turnover in those ranks, or lower satisfaction, lower levels of engagement, or both. So there are lots of other factors as well going on: globalization, increased competitiveness, the Me Too movement, diversity and inclusion. These are all moving parts that really require law firms to change. And a lot of law firms are asking the question, do we have the leaders to affect the right type of change? So that's really the context that we're talking about. And firms are starting to think more about how do we develop stronger leaders to meet those needs.
I think that the leadership topic we're talking about is really interesting. It almost feels like just a great underlying topic that kind of supports or goes hand in hand with almost every one of our topics, because I think in our podcast with previous guests, we're constantly talking about why law firms need to change. So we'll be like, we've identified that mental wellness is important. That's a part of change. Client experience, that's a part of change. Using technology, the intake process, everything is really a part of change. But you're saying that, it could be a leadership issue. And then it's also, we've heard it's also lawyers being reluctant to change in the first place. So I guess what I'm saying is, is it that there are some times where lawyers are like, I have to do these things, but if we don't have the leadership qualities we're looking for, people aren't going to hop on board with what our vision for change is?
A lot of law firms, most law firms realize they have to change, and they have to change on a number of different fronts in order to be competitive, profitable, retain talent, be able to innovate and adapt to changing needs of clients. What they find is change is harder to do than to say that they need change. So what I try to do is help lawyer leaders or professional staff leaders learn tools and practice skills and overcome whatever reluctance that they have to become stronger leaders, to make law firms a more adaptive and responsive and a more rapidly changing entity. I call that a learning organization. We need to learn more quickly so we can better adapt to the environment that we're in. And those firms that can adapt more quickly will be more successful in some of those challenges we mentioned earlier.
So one of the things that really stood out to me on your website was design thinking, which is essentially defining the creative process for innovation. So how do you go about implementing design thinking or redesigning the actual process of delivering legal services?
Well, let's define design thinking for those people who aren't familiar with it. It's really a method. It's a model of innovation. It's a way of thinking of and implementing new effective ways of doing things. My last law firm, Holland & Hart, it's been 12 or 13 years since I've been there, but they saw themselves as an innovative law firm, and I think in many ways that they were. But for most firms, including my former firm, innovation looks a lot like this. A partner or somebody has a great idea. They think about it. They tell a few other people. They get a couple people on board. They get a committee together. They cook it for 2 or 3 years. They try it. And then if they're lucky, that might work for 1 or 2 clients, but it's really hard to adapt. And oftentimes it takes so long to perfect that they've missed the opportunity for delivering that innovation. What design thinking does is it focuses on a deep user need, a deep problem, often a challenging or difficult or wicked problem, and then it's got several steps to design a specific solution to address that problem. So it's gaining empathy for that user or that client by observation and dialogue. It's defining a discrete problem you're trying to solve. It's brainstorming and coming up with lots of ideas. It's going through a process of selecting the right ideas. It's prototyping solutions, and it may be more than one. It may be 3, 4, 5. It's an iterative process. And then finally, you beta test it. And this is a well-tested way of developing innovative and creative and user-centric solutions. We see this in products that we use every day. We see this in services that we use every day. But just now, law firms over the past several years are starting to use this process to come up with innovative solutions for both internal problems and client-facing problems. So how could a law firm use that process? It could be collaborating with a client and saying, okay, what are those elements of doing these types of matters and cases that really bug you? What are those things that really bring us down? What are those things that slow down the process or are terribly expensive or very inefficient? And then let's go through this design thinking problem together as a design team and see if we can find ways to streamline that process or use technology more effectively to lower that cost or solve a problem that's bugging both of us. And they'll use this process, and while they're solving that problem, they're also building trust and collaboration and meeting mutual needs. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. And what do you think is the best way to actually document these processes? Would it be like a software, like a shared document? What have you found in your experience is the easiest way to start?
Well, I think there's lots of technologies you can use to document or use to project manage that. But I think what's most important is trusting the design thinking process. And one of the things we teach in our design thinking workshops is you go out and observe in pairs, or you interview and have dialogues in pairs. So one person's interviewing the user or the client or the people who are involved, the other person's taking notes, and then you switch. And that way you are both the recorder and the observer in different times. Another mindset that we use in design thinking is that it's a people-based process. So the more you can involve people who are subject matter experts, people who understand that part of the industry, people who are outside of your ecosystem that might have a different perspective, people who use that process or observe from different points of view, the more data points you can get, then you can get a different perspective or a more clear perspective on the problem that you're trying to solve.
Going back to leadership for a moment, this is a question I had, and I don't want to forget about it. So as far as developing leaders, do you believe that it's kind of a two-pronged question? Do you believe that some people within the firm just aren't really cut to be leaders? And is it always perceived that the founder or the partners have to be the leaders developed? Or are there other people within the firm that just seem to be better suited to do the leader to make sure that the initiatives that are laid out actually are completed?
I take a very broad view of leadership and what makes up a leader. And I think in many ways, we're all leaders and followers, and it would benefit all of us to hone our leadership and our followership skills. And if you want to talk more about followership, we can do that in a second. When I teach leadership classes, I'll often talk about Cindy, who was the office receptionist at my architectural firm 30-some years ago. And Cindy didn't have a college education. She was a bright person. She was the person who everybody met at the very front of the reception area of the office. And she saw how everything worked. To her right were the partners and the managers. To the left of her was the drafting room. Straight ahead was the storage room and where we made prints. And she saw the whole operation. And after a couple of months, Cindy would say things like, I've been watching how deliveries are made, or we send out prints, or we log information, or we interact or don't interact with each other. And I have an idea. What do you think about that? And it just seemed like every week Cindy had an idea. She said, the people in the left side of the wing don't really know the people on the right side of the wing. And that's a problem, because it causes issues of communication. Turns out, she said, we all have birthdays. Why don't we spend one day a month? We'll buy a cake and some pizza, and we'll all go into the drafting room, and we'll just hang out for 45 minutes, eat pizza and cake, and we catch up with each other. And things like that made a huge difference within the culture of the organization. Communication improved, and people got to know each other better, and engagement was up. And every week, Cindy had this little gem, right? And before you know it, no kidding, Cindy ran the entire firm. We had an office manager, we had a president, but you didn't do anything until you passed it by Cindy. And that's how I kind of see leadership is whether you're in the mailroom or you're a practice group leader or you're a contributor on a practice group, you have to have both leadership and followership skills because you can make a difference.
Yeah, I like that. It kind of reminds me of I'm in the middle of reading Start With Why by Simon Sinek, and I don't love the book, and that's I'm gonna keep that on the record. But he does say that like leaders and CEOs, it's oftentimes not their job to come up with all the ideas. It's their job to create an environment that facilitates good ideas from people that work within the organization. So yeah, I definitely can see that being fostered there.
I guess while we're on the topic of leadership, really. So you were just talking about Cindy. How did the managing partner or whoever's in charge take that step to say like, all right, Cindy has some great ideas, and actually give her more responsibility. Because I think a lot of people will have a problem giving like a receptionist a lot of responsibility just because of the title.
Yeah. In this case, I don't think the managing partner had much of a choice. but it's a great point, right? How do people start giving up control and power? And I think what happens is if you have people who are part of a team, people who don't have power necessarily, there are tactics that they can take to increase their influence and be a stronger player within an organization by being both a leader and a follower. And, one of the things that Cindy did was she would ask questions. Hey, why do we do things this way? Does this make sense? Could we try something different? It wasn't a power move by Cindy. It came from a place of wanting to help and wanting to contribute more. And when we talk about strong followers or followership, we're looking for a couple of things. One is a high level of commitment. Even if you aren't totally buying into the vision of where we're going, you want somebody who is willing to give it their all to make the team or the practice group or the office or whatever it is successful. But you're also looking for a high level of challenge, and not a mean-spirited challenge, but that type of challenge that we saw in Cindy that says, hey, could we try something different? Here's a problem that seems to be dragging some people down. Is there a way that we can get around this? This approach might have a moral implication. Maybe we should try something different that might be a little bit safer, more effective. So you're looking for people who have a high level of commitment and a high level of challenge, and by doing so, they become much stronger contributors. And when you see that type of behavior within a team or organization, those are the folks that often will float to the top and be those emerging leaders, because people see strong followership, which is awfully close to strong leadership.
I definitely like the concept of people definitely fulfilling roles where they lead and then they follow. With your experience and your background working with law firms, do you try to keep it balanced? Do you try to find a balance between the two? Or do you find where people kind of naturally want to kind of lean towards one or the other based off of, their personalities and their position?
Honestly, what I find is a real hunger for help with leadership and management. Look, most firms have not had formal or even informal leadership development programs, and so you will have managing partners and practice group leaders and matter and case leaders who've really never had a class in leadership. And so when we start talking about models and skills that help people better understand how to do a leadership activity, usually they're very, very hungry and interested in doing that. I'll give you an example. I did a program a couple of years ago for an AmLaw 200 firm, and about a third or a half of the practice group leaders were almost brand new. And so we did a program of assessments like Myers-Briggs or DISC, several days of training spread over a year, 10 months of coaching, and some cohort meetings. And one of the skills was just giving feedback. How do you effectively give feedback to other people? And with this group, most of the practice group leaders were in their 30s or young 40s. And what they were struggling with is, how do I give feedback to somebody who was a practice group leader last year, or somebody who was my mentor 10 years ago? How do I give effective feedback to, brand new lawyers who seem to not like being criticized? How do I give effective feedback? How do I have difficult conversations? And so we presented a model, and we did some practicing in training. We used Myers-Briggs in this case, and we talked about how giving feedback to people who are different from you in terms of your personality type might have different reactions, and so how do you adjust for that? And then in coaching, it came up over and over again, saying, hey, help me understand how I can best give so-and-so feedback, because this behavior or this attitude isn't contributing well to the team, or it's a distraction. And there's probably a dozen leadership skills like that lawyers are really looking for help in understanding how to master, because they've never had a model or coaching and how to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I actually have one follow-up question about that, because Chase and I, even when we're filling our roles as leadership within our own agency, we've definitely acknowledged, maybe not necessarily Myers-Briggs, but we definitely know that's one of the more popular ones. There are other assessments and tests out there that typically map out different personality traits, in addition to what kind of rewards people are not susceptible to, but the rewards that people benefit from or appreciate the most. But a lot of times would you say it's about 8 personality types that total? I'm not sure about exactly Myers-Briggs, but in that situation, if it's been identified, and you always want to be in communication, but a lot of times, of course, as a leader, you also want to give valuable feedback, and you don't want people to take it the wrong way. So as a leader, do you feel like people almost are like walking on eggshells if they're acknowledging multiple personality types when they're doing the feedback? And how do you kind of keep up with that if you have dozens, if not hundreds of employees? Sorry, I don't know if that was like a loaded question, but that is actually, out of my curiosity, that's actually like something that even as me in our business, I'm actually the most interested in, not out of everything, but very interested in that kind of question.
So there's a couple things in that question. I maybe I could help deconstruct. One is we often will use personality assessments for a couple of reasons. One is to better understand yourself, and 2 is to understand other people. And if you understand that some people are different from you, if you understand that difference, then you have the ability to adjust your approach to them to be more effective in communication or giving feedback or influencing them, or in the business development context, selling to them or resolving conflict or things like that. I remember one of the first times I did a Myers-Briggs was with a C-level group in a firm in Nashville. And about an hour into the debrief, somebody exclaimed, "Oh, I get it now." She said, "For years, I thought Betty was just a real jerk. Just turns out she's really, really different from me." And that was the aha that we were kind of looking for. And it had helped her say, I can't deal with Betty the same way I would like to be dealt with myself. I'm going to have to deal with her differently. I have to communicate with her differently and rationalize and deal with how we make decisions together differently, because she's a different animal. And the more I understand that, the more effective I will be. That being said, if we use a model, and the model that I use for giving feedback is the Situation Behavior Impact Model, SBI. It's what we teach at the Center for Creative Leadership. That model works with all personality types. You might have to change how you communicate or how you deliver it or your tone, but as a model, that's a strong way of being able to give both positive and constructive feedback. And if an organization is trained and learns about the model, then it could be that much more effective. When I was a CMO, my team went through feedback training, and it really became that killer app for us in terms of working well together. We all gave each other permission to give feedback in this structured way, and it was a way of helping each other recognize their blind spots and to improve. And so my staff would come to me and I'd come to them, or they would come to each other, and we got to this habit of giving effective feedback, which kind of raised the level of performance for all of us. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's a very fascinating topic. I think that I don't know the first thing about doing it for law firms with hundreds of lawyers, but definitely I could see it being something for consideration for maybe some small to medium sized. And then, you'd be the expert for how you do it large scale. But I think that all this stuff is very important for growth and recognition and happiness and everything in between.
Mark, you just mentioned that you were the CMO. I'm a little curious as far as like your background, like where did you start to get to where you are now?
When I was at Holland & Hart, I was there for a couple of years, and we were doing some analytics, and we were looking at the practice groups and offices in the firm and their growth rate, both financially and by head count. And the Pareto rule really came out. 20% of the groups were doing great, double-digit growth, doubling every couple of years. They were just on fire. About 80% were flatlining at best. And we started to ask the question, what was the difference between the high-performing teams and the flatlining teams? And it became evident to me that those that were high performing had really strong leaders. Either they were, quote, natural leaders, or they were ex-military, or they had leadership training from another organization, but it was clear that they kind of got it. And then our question was, how do we help those other 80% become more leaders than just managers or administrators, which is often how they saw their role. And so at Holland and Hart, I started this pursuit of what does leadership development look like for law firms, because there weren't that many people doing it. And what are the skills that you're trying to focus on in leadership development, and what are the leadership competencies we're trying to develop. And when I left the firm in 2008, I kind of knew this is my passion. I want to help lawyers and professional staff become stronger leaders in law firms, to the end of making law firms and legal departments too more sustainable, better places to work, places where people wake up on a Monday morning and say, I want to go to work, rather than just a miserable place where it is for a lot of people and lots of firms. And so that's been my passion.
So of the lawyers and legal professionals listening, if they want to get into contact with you to learn more, possibly work with you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Email, website. My website's leadershipforlawyers.com. I have the design thinking business is designthinkinglegal.com. And my email is mark@leadershipforlawyers.com.
What does leadership development look like in law firms?
It looks like lots of different things right now. Everything from what I call drive-by leadership development for a half-a-day workshop to 12-month-long cohort programs. But let me tell you a little bit what I'm seeing more in law firms. Some law firms are doing leadership programs for mid and senior level associates, and part of that is because at that level, you're starting to see lawyers leading matter and case teams, working with small groups of people and needing some management and leadership skills and abilities. It's also because associates are looking for more soft skill or people skill professional development. And this fits right into that. And so some of those things of self-awareness, personality assessments, feedback, delegation, management, leading teams, they see as a benefit. They feel like the firm is investing into them. Also seeing a lot of investment in practice group and industry group leaders, office managing partner training. And then some of the curriculum is a little bit different, talking about vision, leading change, innovation, design thinking, collaboration, and some more client-facing leadership skills. And a lot of those programs are not one and done, that might be done over a period of time of day-long or half-day-long training sessions, as well as coaching. And we'll often use leadership 360 assessments in times like that, so that people get feedback on their leadership skills from those people around them. Also seeing more leadership development for professional staff, C-level and manager types. I'm doing a management program now for an AmLaw 50 firm, and a lot of it has to do with strategy, emotional intelligence, teamwork, process mapping, things like that. And then finally, senior firm leadership, where these leaders are responsible for leading change, culture change, coaching, mentoring, creating a vision, engaging people on a vision. So it looks a little bit different for them. And the other thing we're starting to see more is work in the area of leadership development and innovation in change management, where lawyers and clients are in the same room together. And they start working as a team, saying, how can we both develop together, but also learn design thinking and process improvement together, so we can apply that to our teams. So thanks for asking. I appreciate that.
Thanks for listening to the Legal Mastermind podcast. If you're interested in working with Ryan and Chase, please email mastermind@marketmymarket.com. Make sure to join the free mastermind group for growing and managing your firm at lawfirmmastermind.com. Ryan Klein and Chase Williams are the managing partners at Market My Market, one of the top legal marketing companies in the United States.